One-on-one with Kim Therriault. Calling and hospice work. When did you first know that caring for people was part of your calling?
I think being that kid working in the nursing home. In fact, the activities director, her name was Peggy, and Peggy told me years later that she was the reason that I became a nurse because I volunteered with her at the nursing home, and I just adored Peggy. She was so kind and so sweet, and just really ran a really good program and made sure that the people had some quality of life. And I didn't even really know what that was at that time, The man that my mother would take the pineapple milkshakes and stuff to him, I was probably in about the 8th grade whenever he was actually dying. And we had gone over that night before, and we had brought him a milkshake, and he couldn't drink it. And you could tell he was hurting. He was in pain, And I got home that night, and I was laying in bed, and it just bothered me so much. They were such just sweet, kind people. And it bothered me to see him hurting. And I remember praying that night, God, please, just take him home. Just take him home. Don't let him suffer like this anymore. And about 1:30 that morning, I heard the phone ring. And I woke up, and I thought, Mr. P's gone. He's gone. And I went right back to sleep and got up the next morning, and that was what had happened, was that he had passed. And so there was that piece of it that I was sad, and I knew Miss P was going to be lonely, and she had taken care of him for so long, But I had such a great peace about him passing, and that God had answered that prayer.
What led you into hospice?
Hospice was kind of a funny piece because I never saw myself death and dying, I felt like I did really good on the hospital floor. I had a task list to do, and I would make sure those tasks were done. Each patient had different things that they need to have happen. And my job, in my mind, was to get that patient to the next shift. That was my goal, And there was several patients that I had kind of at the same time, and they were all dying. And this one lady, I never even had her, but for some reason her husband would just find me, and he would come and talk to me. And he would call her darling. And Darlin opened her eyes today. Darlin's not doing well today. And he just loved her so much. And finally one day she was getting better. We all thought she wasn't going to make it. And he came and got me, and he said, Darlin's awake. Would you come meet her? And so I got to go in and meet her, and I had heard so many things about her, and he told me so many stories. And it was kind of her rally before she passed. And so that was a little difficult. And then I had a couple other patients that were on my side of the hall. And one of the doctors was actually friends with my dad, and on his order that he had written was for her to have morphine IV push every 5 minutes until comfortable. And I thought, oh, he wrote that order wrong, So I called him up and I said, Dr. G, I said, this order, I don't think it's right. Well, what did I write? So I told him, and he said, it's right. That's what I want to have happen. He said, I'll be up there in a few minutes. Wait for me. And I thought, oh, goodness, now I'm going to be in trouble, And so he came up on the floor where I was at, and he said, come down here and talk to me. So we went down it was like a little ledge in front of the windows, and we went down there and talked, and he said, Kim, he said, what are we trying to do with this morphine? And I said, we'll make her comfortable. And he said, exactly. And he said, what is her diagnosis? And I told him, we all knew she wasn't probably going to be able to leave the hospital. And he said, and if we don't give her the morphine, what's going to happen? I said, well, she's really going to be in a lot of pain. And he said, right. He said, this is end of life. And he said, this is what we do to make someone comfortable. And he said, is this your first patient that is in this condition? And I said, well, at this late stage, I said, it really is. And he sat there with me and talked. He must have been 30 minutes. He sat there and talked to me about end-of-life care, what we're looking at, that we're not there to end somebody's life, that's not what the morphine is going to do, and that's not what our goal is. Our goal is to make sure that she's comfortable. And so he taught me that day about titrating, about you take it to this point, whenever they're comfortable, then that's going to be her dose. And he just spent the time with me for that I would understand, and that I knew that I wasn't ending her life, because I would never do that, you know. But he took the time to really talk to me and teach me. And so that's what I've tried to do through my hospice career. But I had 2 people that wanted me to do hospice during that time. And I actually went and talked to one of my nursing instructors about hospice. And she was like, oh, Kim, you can't do hospice. You wouldn't be able to separate yourself. And I thought, well, probably not, you know. So I didn't do it. And they came again, and I still didn't do it. Then I went to work at the doctor's office, and I was in charge of the hospice patients. So if a patient was on hospice, the orders went through me. So I got to know them when they came into the office. I got to know their families. And I was approached again if I would be willing to come and do hospice. And I told them, I said, guys, I don't think I can keep it together. I don't think I can do this. I mean, I've just wanted to get people to the next shift kind of thing, you know. And I said, I don't think I can. I said, I think I'll fall apart. And she said, there's enough, Cindy had told me, she said, there's enough staples and tape in our office, we can put you right back together again. And so I thought, you know, I felt like that God had chased me for this, you know, that it was just too many times in my life that I've been put into that position, you know. One of my best friends in high school had cancer and passed away 2 weeks before graduation, you know. And his name was Jim, and we would sell gym shorts. We had little cutout shorts, and they were gym shorts, and we would sell them for $1, and we would wear them on our shirts, and then we would bring that money to his mom and everything for her to be able to, you know, use it for him. So it was just almost like Helen Keller. It was just, and Katie, it was like I'd been prepared for these things, you know. And I thought, well, okay, I'll try it, you know. I don't think I'm going to be very good at it, but I'll try it, you know. And that was 26 years ago. And I have loved every moment of being next to somebody when they're passing, being able to be there for that family. Answer those questions that they ask, that they just need to know what's happening. They're scared. And with hospice, I mean, it's things that we see every day, but they don't. And they need to know a lot of times that, you know what, this is normal. These are things that, you know, doesn't happen to everybody, but we expect them. And let me tell you what the body's doing at this point. And just that you can just see the relief come across their face whenever they know that, okay, this death rattle that they talk about and they hear, it doesn't mean that they're drowning. It doesn't mean that they're suffocating. This is what we're actually hearing, and this is why the body's doing that, you know. And I think it gives them just some peace. So yeah, that was kind of the start of hospice for me.
Most people run from death and grief. What made you willing to walk toward it?
My faith in God, honestly. I still remember the first patient that passed away, you know, and to be invited into someone's home in that most precious, intimate time was just almost stopped my heart. I remember the family, the daughters and the wife were around his bed. And I had gone to school with a couple of his daughters, I wasn't friends with them, but we knew each other. And I remember peeking around the corner at him and watching him, and they were singing hymns and praying, and I would peek around that corner. I could see he was still breathing, and finally one of the daughters was like, "Come, we want you in here too." And so I got to stand there. I was invited. It gets me teary. But I was invited to be with that family and to be able to pray with them and to be able to sing with them. And that while they were losing their father and their husband, And I remember them looking at me. I was watching him, and I saw him take his last breath. And one of the daughters had looked at me, and I looked at her, and I nodded my head. And she kind of stopped everybody, and they moved back for me to be able to go and see if he, if he had vital signs or not. But that was honestly, I felt like I had 1 foot here and 1 foot in heaven. You could feel that you were on holy ground at that point, and it was precious. It was precious. And I think that was the first time that I realized that death is honestly as precious as birth is. And I'll never forget it.
What has hospice taught you about living?
So many things. Forgive, let go, ask for forgiveness, be kind to people who may be yelling at you or having a really bad day, because we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea what news that they just got. We have no idea if they're having trouble at home. We have no idea if they just got let go from their job. Just be kind. Be loving. Give people a second chance. Don't be judgmental. And take the vacation now. Don't wait. Do it now. Enjoy that time. One of the things that I really try to talk to the families and stuff about, as Americans, we don't talk about death. We don't talk about dying. We don't talk about our wills. We don't talk about what we want and what we don't want. I don't know what we expect people to do once it's our turn, but, we don't talk about it. And we feel like if we say it, it's going to happen. And so many times I have gone to a home and don't tell mom she's dying, she doesn't know. And I go in to see the patient, don't tell my daughter I'm dying, she doesn't know. And it's like, you guys need to talk. Y'all need to talk. And so to be able to help facilitate that, or married couples, my goodness, they've been married for 50 or 60 years. Don't quit talking now. These, in time, these are going to be some of the most precious conversations that you have ever had with each other. Don't quit talking now.
What do you wish more people understood about hospice care?
Hospice is there for support. We are not there to end a life. We are not there to hasten a death. We are there for comfort and symptom management for the patient. And for the family, we're there for support and to explain what's happening, things to look for so that they know when we're getting to the end, when is it time to call the rest of the family home. Changing of the patient. I remember one time I taught a family how to use a turn sheet, and they thought that I just hung the moon and stars, and I'm thinking, gosh, it was just a turn sheet. And I thought, well, geez, Kim, you had to go to school to learn what a turn sheet was, And so then I started thinking, it's the little things. It's not the great big things. It's the little things. How do you empty a catheter? How do you give medication to somebody who's not exactly coherent. What can we do to make sure that they still get symptom management, even if they're not able to swallow those great big pills anymore? We've got a lot of tricks up our sleeve, but we're not ever there to hasten a death. We are there for symptom management and comfort.
Can you share a patient or family story that changed you without naming anyone or sharing private details?
One of my favorite stories that I tell, because it was a pivotal moment for me as a nurse. And in New Mexico, we get 5-7 inches of rain a year, not like here at all. And anyway, there was this man, and he was probably in his 40s, and he had a Trans Am outside. And so a lot of times we would do our visits just out there on his front porch. He lived way out in the country, and we would do visits out there. We would go through all of his medicines, everything. And one day I'd asked him what his pain level was, and he said it was an 8. And I said, okay, and I got my medicine sheet out and started looking at it, and I said, well, I'll call the doctor and see if we can get this pain medicine increased, and then we can move this over here. And I was going through everything, and he said, never mind. He just kind of patted me on my knee, and he said, I'm not in any pain. And he laughed a lot. He was a big jokester, and so I was waiting to kind of hear the punchline, and he just kept looking at me and smiling. And I thought, okay, his face has changed. I've overstepped somewhere. So I said, I think I may have overstepped a little bit. And he just smiled at me. And I said, you be really honest with me, and I'll be really honest with you. And he said, deal. And I said, what is your pain level? He said, it's an 8. And I said, you don't have to hurt like this. There's things that we can do, And I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, I don't want you to do anything. And I said, why? And he said, Kim, if I take any more pain medicine, I can't drive my car. And to me, that meant everything to me. And at that point, I think I became a real hospice nurse. Because it's so important that we understand where someone's dignity lies. That we understand what's important to these patients that we're taking care of. For me, somebody can drive me around all day long. I'm fine with it. But for him, that was who he was. That was something he wanted to do. And up until like the last week of his life, he would drive his car all the way down to his mailbox. He'd pull up, he'd get his mail out of the mailbox, and he would drive back over there, and they would help him get back into the house. But he drove that car, like I said, till the very last week of his life. But for me, it changed my life, because a lot of times in medicine, if someone doesn't do exactly what the doctor says or the nurse says, in the time that the doctor says or the nurse says, they are listed as non-compliant. And in hospice, we don't have to worry about that. If somebody doesn't want to take pain medicine, it's okay. If they want to do more holistic, if they want to rely more on their spiritual beliefs, that's fine. We're going to be there and back them up on that, and we'll do other things. We'll do, some music. If they want to listen to their kind of music, whether it's hymns, whether it's country music, and that kind of gets their mind off of things, then that's what we're going to do. Massage, heat, cold. There's other things that we can do to help get some of the pain under control. But we want to meet that patient where they are, not what I think is important for that patient or what medicine thinks is important for that patient, but what that patient wants, what makes them happy.
What have dying people taught you that the rest of us need to hear?
That it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to be angry that day. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be mad. It's okay. It's okay. Meeting people where they are and not taking offense. If they're going to be angry that day, they're not angry at you. They're not angry at their daughter. They're angry because they're getting ready to leave. Or they're angry because of choices they may have made in their life that they wish they could go back. And I think that's where the forgiveness comes in, and having empathy for someone else, giving that sympathy to yourself sometimes, letting that patient know that it's okay to be like this. And for the daughter or the spouse, it's okay to be angry. Let's talk about it. Not feeling like they have to keep it all inside, that they always have to be smiling and they can't be angry, or they can't really tell them how they're feeling. It's just okay.